New update from Hell Worlds. Gen Alpha cannot read.
The kids can't read, write, or remember anything or use their imaginations, and the teachers are wondering why.
I have 110-ish students. 2 of them are reading on grade level right now. 18 of them are at a kindergarten level.
Less than 1/3 of 4th and 8th graders can read at proficient levels, and it doesn't get much better for adults. 45 million American adults are functionally illiterate.
We're witnessing the collapse of the American education system.
New update from Hell Worlds. In case there wasn't enough things to be freaked out about, to be worried about in regards to the future, I have one that really should be a national conversation, and I'm shocked that politicians aren't talking about it. Like, no one with any influence is really talking about it. Gen Alpha cannot read, and apparently neither can adults, but we'll get into that. I fell down the most demented TikTok rabbit hole the other day, which sounds unserious, but I promise it really is. I don't know how I even came across this, but I came across all these teachers basically having meltdowns about how none of their young Gen Alpha students can read, use their imaginations, communicate. Some of them don't know their own names. They can't tie their shoes, just like incredibly stunted.
The kids can't read, write, or remember anything or use their imaginations, and the teachers are wondering why.
We're witnessing the collapse of the American education system.
I don't understand why they're not stressing to y'all how bad it is. Like, I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are...
Even if you don't have kids, I don't have kids, I feel like this is something that everyone should be concerned about, considering we have to live in a world with, it's no offense to Gen Alpha kids, obviously, but we're going to have to live in the world with you, and it's a little bit scary that you can't read. And it is not just TikTok teachers being dramatic. There are some terrifying numbers to back this up about the ongoing literary crisis. Less than 1/3 of 4th and 8th graders can read at proficient levels. Only 10% of multilingual students can read at proficient levels, and it doesn't get much better for adults. Apparently, this made me want to cry and panic. About 130 million American adults have low literacy skills, and 45 million American adults are functionally illiterate. So if you're like me and you catch yourself wondering why everyone around us seems to be just like not understanding things, just like things are getting kind of dumber, just very much dumbed down, 45 million adults are functionally illiterate. But we're going to focus on, if we can, the kids today, because it's getting even worse. So let's get into these teachers so you can see why I was spiraling watching all these.
I teach 8th grade history, and I have 110-ish students. 2 of them are reading on grade level right now. 18 of them are at a kindergarten level.
So I realized something recently. I am on my phone way more than I'd like to admit. Scrolling, playing games, wasting time. And so I figured if I'm gonna be doing that, I might as well get something out of it, right? So I started using this app called FreeCash. And it's basically a platform where you can try out games, complete surveys, test apps, and get rewarded for it. So I downloaded, tested it out for myself, and what's amazing is how simple it is. You go in, pick an offer, like a game, and just start playing. So I tried one of the game offers for a few minutes, and you can actually see your progress tracking in real time as you play, which is really nice. And there's tons of different options on FreeCash, so you are not gonna be stuck doing the same thing over and over again. One important thing though, you do need to make sure that app tracking is turned on. Otherwise, it won't properly register your progress and rewards. Also, before I use it, I did check online reviews. It has really strong ratings on Trustpilot and the app stores, which made me feel a lot better about trying it. And when it comes to cashing out, it's actually super straightforward. Once you hit the minimum, which is around $25, you can start cashing out on PayPal, gift cards, and other options. And just to be clear, it's not something that's gonna replace your job, but it is something I've been doing when I have a few minutes here and there on my phone. It's honestly just a really easy thing to add into your normal routine. So if you wanna try it, use my link below. You'll get a $10 bonus after you complete your first offer, and I will keep you guys updated on how it goes for me. Thank you so much to FreeCash for sponsoring this video, and now on to the rest of the video.
55 of those students are between a 2nd and 4th grade level. We were doing guided notes, supposed to be a real easy day. It was review. They wrote down, Maryland was founded as a safe haven for Catholics. It was on the board. They wrote it down. And before we moved on, I call on a student and I ask, hey, where were the Catholics one more time? And these students, what they do is they look at me, and then they look at their notes, and then they look at the board. They look back at their notes. And some of them never answered me. They never figured out the answer. It was wild. And I kept giving them hints, like rephrasing the question and saying, like, it's in your notes. We just wrote it down. Where are the Catholics? It's on the board. And they never got it. They can't read their own notes. And I don't mean their handwriting. I mean, like, they can't make heads or tails of it on the page. These kids have a frightening ability for information to go from their eyes to their hands and not pass through the brain at all.
So that's terrifying. And I've seen a lot of studies about how reading retention and actually keeping the information that you're reading, storing it somewhere in your brain, doesn't come as easily when you're reading off of a screen, which is what kids are reading now. So for all the technology that's being put in schools now, all the tools, all the computers, you don't retain the information the same. Obviously, they're all fried. The kids are all fried from screen time, going crazy, being in front of the blue lights all the time, then the fluorescent lights in schools. Like, schools are also horrible environments for learning, which I'm going to go into how I feel. I just feel like I know that all of this is very intentional, and that part of destroying the middle class is actually dumbing the kids down, is actually destroying literacy rates intentionally. And I promise we'll get there. But let's just keep going.
So I'm not really understanding why they're not telling y'all. Like, we all know that the world is behind, like, globally, like, because of the pandemic and stuff. But I don't understand why they're not stressing to y'all how bad it is. Like, I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are... I'm going to just say this. I teach 7th grade. They are still performing on the 4th grade level. I don't care how you flip it, turn it, swing it, swindle it. They still performing on the 4th grade level. Ain't nobody talking about how they just keep moving, passing them on. They just keep passing them on. I can put as many zeros in this grade book as I want to. They're going to move that child to the 8th grade next year.
I'm going to try not to be shady. The teachers could potentially also be a problem. I'll just say that. However, he mentioned the pandemic, which is vital to this. So between 2019 and 2022, there was an unprecedented decline in reading scores. Even outlets like PBS that were super pro lockdown, super pro every COVID measure, keeping kids out of school for 2 years, has had to admit recently that lockdowns still have an effect on the development of kids, the intelligence of kids, the IQ of kids. So pandemic babies, which are now the Gen Alpha kids going through middle school, show a higher risk of developmental delays compared with children born before COVID. Over 90% of early childhood professionals in surveys found the pandemic seriously disrupted early screening and identification for developmental delays. They basically stunted an entire generation in so many ways, took kids out of school for 2 years during their prime developmental, years. And now the corporate press is now finally slowly trying to admit that we absolutely stunted the kids. Stunted everybody, in my opinion, right? Like, I just feel like since the pandemic, everybody has gotten dumber in so many ways. So the question then becomes, how does this reverberate towards the future? How does the stunting of Gen Alpha during their prime developmental years, how does that affect the rest of their lives and the rest of the world having to cohabitate with them? And it's not that I'm trying to say that obviously there's no, value judgment. It's not their fault. It's not trying to speak badly about an entire generation of kids. But the point is, it's not even just intellect. Obviously, mental health and emotional health is something that's going to be linked to a child's ability to perform well in school. A large U.S. review of 132 studies found that over 90% of mental health outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and even more severe conditions, worsened as a result of lockdowns. Depression among 3 to 17-year-olds had a 44% relative increase. The idea of a 3-year-old's having depression. There still has not been a national discussion about lockdowns and how that comes into play necessarily. And that goes for everyone. There still has not been really a rehashing of lockdowns because it naturally inspires the question of, was it worth it? And the answer is emphatically no, because what exactly is the payoff? Where's the trade-off for damaging and disrupting the development and education of kids, especially kids? For the general public, it was a virus with a 1% mortality rate. And for kids, people under the age of 18, it was 0.01%. So lifelong potential stunting, lifelong ramifications to rescue them from a virus that had a 0.01% chance. I mean, it really is criminal. And they probably don't teach this anymore because, the schools are so trash, but you don't repeat history because you learn it, right? So we're never going to do that again, right? We're never going to lock down over a virus like that. Okay.
Because in kindergarten, As I sub, here's what I'm seeing. I see kids who cannot use their words. They don't know how to wait their turn. They can't hold scissors. They don't know how to hold a pencil. They don't know how to spell their own name. By the time your child gets to kindergarten, they should know their ABCs and they should know a lot of their numbers. They should know the days of the weeks, the months of the year, who the president is. They should know how to sit still, at least for a little while. I'm not telling you everything has to be perfect, but as I sub, I am seeing a lot of children with a lot of those deficits. But there's one thing they do know how to do, and that is how to turn on an iPad and how to use it. It's very sad because those children will be left behind. And in each year as they go along, the gaps are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
There's also so much data on blue light and how that negatively affects kids and their development. People, how it affects people, right? And that's the crazy thing is, how can we understand how toxic and unhealthy it is for kids to be constantly attached to a screen if we're all victims of it as well? And not for nothing, don't you feel a little dumber when you're on your phone too much? Like when I'm scrolling for too long and that blue light is hitting those corneas, I can feel my brain kind of slowing down. I can feel myself kind of dumbing down from doing that. And it's so scary. And there's so many studies now that we can see that are linking screen time and blue light to higher anxiety, sleep problems, which if you're exhausted and anxious, you're not going to perform well in school either. So it seems like they're just set up to fail in every possible way. And again, to be clear, I don't have kids in school. I could not care about this topic, you know what I'm saying? But I have to live in the world with people. Like by the time I'm old and retired, Gen Alpha is going to be in the White House. So I have, as we all should have, a vested interest in making sure that as a species, we are not stunting ourselves like this.
I say this with the utmost love and patience that I can say it with. Y'all, the literacy rates right now are insane. They're crazy. Kids aren't reading. They're not recognizing letters. They're not recognizing letter sounds. This is going to go much deeper than we think it's going to go. There's teachers in 5th grade saying that their students are reading on a 2nd, 3rd grade level. I have students that can't recognize their letter sounds. I teach 1st grade. We got to do something. And I love y'all, but it can't only be the teachers doing it.
I mean, she's absolutely right about that. Like offloading the entire responsibility on teachers is not a good thing. And it's so sad because this is not any sort of flex about me being like a super smart kid when I was growing up, but like I was writing like my own little novels that were like 100 to 200 pages each in like 2nd grade. By like 5th, 6th grade, I was like on message boards writing like fan fiction for Harry Potter and stuff. I had read every Harry Potter book up at that point. Like reading and writing were extremely important to me. And it's been something that has shaped my entire life. And so the idea that there's kids now not only being, you know, stripped of the opportunity to engage in that and to enjoy that and to be enriched by what that does for your brain, they couldn't try if they wanted to. I mean, not knowing letter sounds is crazy. Not knowing how to spell your name is insane. To take it back to the conspiracy brain because you have to, because the word conspiracy just means an organized lie, it's not that deep. I believe all of this is engineered. You know, we all acknowledge that there's a systematic destruction of the middle class, right? And if you come from a leftist perspective, you're going to think it's only about money. If you look a little deeper, do you think there's more than one method they're utilizing to destroy the middle class? I would say so, because if you look throughout history, reading up until pretty recently in history was something that only the elites could do. Maybe not the elites, but just richer people, right? Like education was not something that was for the common person. There's a reason why with slaves, it was illegal to teach a slave how to read. It was of the utmost importance to make sure that slaves could not read. And going even deeper, I think one of the reasons why they talk about slavery in a past tense and they really drill that story into your head more than any other story in history class, and even in the media, we always have to talk about slavery in the context of, can you believe that happened? And, you know, for the reason of obviously not repeating past sins, but also I think that they talk about slavery in a past tense and drill it in your head so much so that you don't understand and realize you're a slave right now. I think they're absolutely engineering a new type of slave class right now, a surveillance state that is beyond anything we can imagine. And part of it is making sure that you don't know how to read. They're not going to teach you cursive anymore because they don't want you reading old documents. That's the other thing. If you can't read basic stuff, and again, it's not just the kids, it's like adults. If you can't read basic stuff, how could you ever read an old religious text? How could you ever read maybe older history books that don't necessarily conform to the ones we learn now? How could you ever read old documents? How could you know where you're coming from? They don't want you going anywhere productive, and part of that is making sure you don't know where you're coming from. I think one of the reasons why they want you always thinking of it as in the past is that so you don't recognize that they're engineering a new slave class right now. Call me crazy if you want. I don't really care. Crazy does not equal wrong. It's also, I think, an intention to keep you dumb and dumb you down further and further. No matter where you look, it seems to be, okay, so we have fluoride in the water, despite the fact that there's been so many studies showing it's linked to lower IQ in humans and animals. There was a new overall review in 2025 showing over 74 studies linking it with lower IQ. So this is not just fringe stuff either. And it's not just fluoride. You can go even deeper if you don't want to, latch on to fluoride because it has this stigma. If you look at processed foods, studies in toddlers and preschoolers show that high intakes of processed foods ages 2 to 3 predicts a lower IQ even after adjusting for socioeconomic factors. So again, not to pick on leftists right now as I love to do, but they tend to always see things through, it's just socioeconomic. It's just if you're poor, then that determines your outcome. If you're rich, that determines your outcome. Not really. If you're eating processed foods, which kids all across classes are doing, you're going to have a lower IQ. So why is it that every cafeteria in America is giving kids processed foods that make them dumber? And then they're drinking water from the fountains full of fluoride that can make you dumber. And then they're under fluorescent lights. And then it's just it's all set up to cause. And many studies, even very, very recently with ChatGPT, showing that it makes you dumber to rely on ChatGPT for research.
If you're using ChatGPT for anything, work, writing, school, you need to hear this. In the experiment, students wrote timed essays using either just their own brains, Google search, or ChatGPT. And the ChatGPT group didn't just do worse, they couldn't remember a single accurate quote from what they had just written. Their brain scans also showed the same thing, the weakest activity and connection between areas, the shallowest processing. The researchers called it cognitive debt. You save effort now, but you pay for it later with worse recall and weak
coming out and being like, hey, don't worry, we're going to have AI as teachers simultaneously with these studies showing AI makes you dumber and it does not help you learn. It's just really, really bad. We have half of adults right now with low literacy skills. Over 2/3 of kids right now with low literacy skills. We have Gen Alpha. What comes after Gen Alpha? I think it's Gen Beta. That's a unfortunate name for the one after Alpha. What are they going to be? Is it going to be 10% of Gen Beta can read? And then when 10% of society can read, that is a perfect ideal for a slave state. I'm sorry.
The kids can't read, write, or remember anything or use their imaginations, and the teachers are wondering why. Parents are confused with why our children are coming home with these crazy grades or not knowing how to do their homework, so then we can't help them because they don't know how to tell us what the hell they're doing in class. All across the country, we got teachers saying the same thing, that these kids are not in the level or on the level of the grade that they're in, that their handwriting is crazy, that they have zero retention and zero access to imagination. They will practice.
Do you know how scared, even if you can't read, you don't have access to imagination? But I guess that goes hand in hand, right? Because my access to imagination, the walls of my mind were so much more colorful, infinitely more colorful based on things that I was reading as a kid. So that's terrifying. Hope comes from imagination. You know what I mean? To go back to the mental health part, if you don't have a strong imagination and you're in a bad situation, you're not going to have hope. You inherently have to imagine, a currently fictitious, better reality for yourself and for the world. So I don't want to go too doomer about it and be like, the new generation has no hope, but it's they need to be able to have that. All that to say, I don't really have a solution. I am so sorry. Not to be the person that's complaining about things but not providing solutions. All I know is this needs to be a national discussion so that people with more influence and power can hopefully try to fix it. I don't understand why Trump is not talking about these things. I don't understand why Congress isn't talking about these things. Like, this seems to me to be one of the premier problems happening right now. But please tell me if I'm just being too much of a doomer. Tell me if you agree. Are there any teachers in the chat who want to put in the comments their stories or their, firsthand experience with this? Are there parents in the chat who want to, weigh in? Like, I'm going to read all the comments. Let me know. Thanks again to Free Cash for sponsoring today's video. Go check them out with the QR code somewhere on the screen or my link in the description to get your $10 bonus. Subscribe to this YouTube channel as well as my podcast channel. Follow me on X, Instagram, TikTok, all the things, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.